Hello there, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics of Africa and Arabia. Egypt wants to scale back the role of its powerful military in the domestic economy. This emerges from a new country report published by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, on Tuesday. With structural reforms, the government wants to reduce the state footprint and enable private sector-led growth and jobs by creating a level playing field, it says. The rules, supported by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, would apply to all state-owned companies, including military-owned companies. President al-Sisi came to power in a military-backed coup in 2013. Since then, the already powerful military has played an even greater role. It affects almost all areas of the Egyptian economy, such as housing construction or public infrastructure projects, such as the expansion of the Suez Canal or the construction of a new capital east of Cairo. The military also operates gas stations and produces household appliances, industrial chemicals and food, such as bread, meat and pasta. These activities are actually very covert, and they are usually only estimates of the extent and income from the military business. The fact that the IMF is now mentioning them in an unusually direct manner and that the government is willing to implement reforms shows how much Egypt's economic crisis has worsened. After Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine began, foreign investors withdrew billions. Fresh money from the regional neighbors in the Gulf could only partially cushion the crisis. Inflation rose to 22% in December, pushing more people into poverty. The IMF estimates that Egypt faces a funding gap of around $17 billion over the next 4 years. The central bank devalued the local currency last year amid talks of a new $3 billion IMF loan. As a result, the pound has lost around 40% of its value over the course of a year. The German conservative foreign politician Roderich Kiesewetter calls for the repurchase of Gaypart anti-aircraft tanks from Qatar for the benefit of the Ukraine. The Qatari Gaypart tanks are currently not needed there and are in operational conditions, so I would think it would be a good idea to buy them back. That's what Kiesewetter told the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung. Anything that can help Ukraine win, we should do, he said. The German Bundeswehr no longer uses Gaypart tanks and has already delivered 30 of the tanks to Ukraine, which was under Russian attack and still is. The Gaypart has proven itself in action and was initially used very efficiently to combat ground targets, said Kiesewetter. He criticized that Germany had not supplied enough ammunition for the tanks to Ukraine. Gaypart tanks are armed with twin 35mm cannons made by Swiss armourers Oerlikon. The manufacturer of weapons and ammunition now belongs to Rheinmetall. Switzerland recently blocked the transfer of Gaypart ammunition with reference to its neutrality, though. It is all the more important that Germany not only asks about more Gayparts in Qatar, but above all about ammunition, said Kiesewetter. Without additional ammunition, more Gaypart tanks from Qatar would do nothing for Ukraine. On Friday, the defense ministers of the Western Allies will meet at the Ramstein US Air Base in Rhineland-Palatinate in Germany to discuss further arms deliveries to the war zone. The United Nations Security Council has extended an important aid mechanism for people in need in the civil war country Syria. The Council decided unanimously on Monday in New York. Russia prevailed with its demand for an extension of initially only 6 instead of 12 months. Aid agencies had previously warned the humanitarian crisis in Syria would worsen if the previous resolution had expired on Tuesday and not been renewed. The mechanism ensures that UN aid supplies are also brought via Turkey to Syrian regions that are not controlled by the government. The support has already been extended several times. In South Africa, the National Prosecutor's Office has opened new allegations of crimes committed during the apartheid era. The broadcaster SABC reports 64 initiated procedures. There are cases in which there are clear indications of human rights violations. They had previously been negotiated in South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The governing party in South Africa, the ANC, announced last week that it would bring more cases of apartheid-era human rights abuses to court. Observers also see this as a reaction to the high number of unpunished crimes committed by the apartheid police at the time. South Africa formally abolished apartheid in 1994 when Nelson Mandela became the country's first black president. Since then, the legal workup has continued, and recently several racist incidents in the country had caused a stir. In the midst of the economic crisis in Lebanon, Iran wants to support the Mediterranean country with the construction of power plants. This was announced by Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amira Abdollahian on Friday during a visit to Beirut. A lack of electricity is currently one of the biggest problems facing the Lebanese, and a large part of the electricity generation comes from diesel generators. The Mediterranean country has been suffering from the worst economic crisis in its history for more than 3 years. It was exacerbated by the corona pandemic and the devastating explosion in the port of Beirut in August 2020. 3/4 of the population live in poverty. The currency has lost more than 90% of its value, and inflation is at 150%. Because of the poor infrastructure, many Lebanese have to live without electricity for many hours a day. During his visit, Amira Abdollahian also met the head of the Lebanese Shia organization Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah. The militia was formed with Iranian support in 1982 in response to the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Since then, they have been fighting against Israel, both politically and violently. What they call Party of God has been represented in parliament since 1992. The group is part of Iran's axis of resistance, as they call it. However, Amira Abdollahian said in Beirut that Iran does not want to interfere in Lebanon's politics. Hezbollah is involved in charitable work but also has a military arm, which is estimated to have several thousand fighters. The group has been banned here in Germany since 2019. Germany and France have pledged further support to Ethiopia in its fight against the food crisis exacerbated by the Russian war in Ukraine. Especially in times when the crises overlap, the Russian war of aggression, the climate crisis and the hunger crisis, support must be increased. That was said by German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock on Thursday in the Ethiopian city of Adana when visiting the country's largest grain warehouse of the United Nations World Food Programme, the WFP. The Russian president uses food as a weapon, criticized Baerbock, who was accompanied by French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna. This exacerbates the dramatic situation of the food supply worldwide because the droughts in the world have continued to increase, she said. For this reason, it is so important that we not only react to the brutal Russian war of aggression with help for Ukraine, but have significantly increased our humanitarian aid, our food aid worldwide, she said. There is a dramatic drought in Ethiopia. The country is heavily dependent on wheat and fertilizers from Ukraine and from Russia. According to the Welthungerhilfe here in Germany, around 22 million people have too little to eat. Baerbock emphasized that food is a human right. It must not be attacked militarily as a target in Ukraine, nor may aid transport in conflict areas here in Ethiopia or anywhere else in the world be used as a target. And Colonna underscored, the people here who are suffering from the drought are not responsible for what is happening in Ukraine. We must therefore help them. It's a humanitarian duty. Germany and France supported the Ukrainian grain donation by financing or organizing the transport so that the people in Ethiopia don't also become victims of the Russian war of aggression, as they put it. Baerbock and Colonna found out about the grain aid from the Ukraine and its distribution in Ethiopia in a warehouse. The storage complex has a capacity of 218,000 tons. At the end of December, 25,000 tons of wheat were delivered from Ukraine via Djibouti, where they are waiting for distribution. Rwandan President Paul Kagame announced on Monday before the country's Chamber of Deputies that Rwanda would not accept any more refugees from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This was in response to allegations by Kinshasa that Rwanda was supporting the M23 armed group. There is a type of refugee that I don't think we will accept anymore. We cannot continue to take in refugees for whom we are then somehow blamed or even insulted, Kagame said, declaring that Rwanda cannot bear the burden of refugees from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And that was reported by the radio station RFI. The Rwandan president called on anyone who thinks it is Rwanda's problem and not Congo's to remove the Congolese who are on its territory. Those who come every day because of the actions of their government and their institutions and say that the government is not working properly, that's still not my problem. And if it is my problem, then it's your problem as an international community. I speak to them. It's your problem as well as mine, he said. The Rwandan government has repeatedly denied its alleged support for the rebels, despite a recent report by United Nations experts claiming that the Rwandan authorities are engaged in direct intervention in neighboring Democratic Republic of the Congo. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, at the end of November, Rwanda was hosting more than 76,000 Congolese on its territory, some of them for more than 20 years, while local media consulted by the aforementioned radio station reported more than 2,000 new arrivals in the last 2 months. At least 10 people have been killed in a bomb attack on the church in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and 27 people were injured. The homemade explosive device detonated during a church education conference in the city of Kasindi in the eastern province of North Kivu. That's what Radio Okapi reports. A military spokesman described the incident at the Pentecostal church as an act of terrorism. According to the army, investigations into the terrorist attack are ongoing. A suspect, a Kenyan national who was found undocumented at the scene of the crime, was arrested. The army asked the population to avoid crowds for the time being. According to the site intelligence group, which specializes in extremist propaganda, IS affiliate Central African Province, or ISCAP, also known as the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, claimed responsibility for the attack. The terrorists threatened further attacks, wrote site director Rita Katz on Twitter in the evening. The Communications Ministry of the Democratic Republic of the Congo also blamed the ADF for the explosion in online networks. The ADF is on the US terror list, and they are accused of killing thousands of Congolese civilians and carrying out bomb attacks in neighboring Uganda. Since 2021, the Congolese and Ugandan military have been working together against the ADF. Kasindi is on the border with Uganda and has been the target of several attacks by ADF fighters. More than 120 armed groups have been fighting for influence in the North Kivu region for decades. The fighting has displaced almost 6 million people. According to the United Nations, hundreds of thousands are suffering from extreme food shortages. At the end of January, Pope Francis will begin his trip to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which was postponed to 2022. Unlike the originally planned trip, he will not visit Goma, the capital of the North Kivu region. And this concludes this week's report on politics in Africa and Arabia. But tomorrow you can see my next video, of course. I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.